function to get in touch with the organizers if you need to mention anything or ask any questions. Okay, so I think we'll jump into it. Thank you once again for joining us. Today's workshop is called How to Grow Your Bahraini Business Using Technology. And I'm going to talk to you about the agenda in a bit after we get through some introductions about what this program is and the organizations. So Startup Workshops is a series of workshops by Startup Magazine. Startup Magazine is created these workshops for Bahraini women looking to start their own startups or learn new skills or take their business to the next level. So we're covering a wide range of audience here, from people who are just thinking about starting a business to people who are established and thinking about growing. The funding and partnerships for this project is funded by the US government and is made possible through partnerships with Temkeen, Zain Bahrain, Manama Shapers, Ubayn Hill, and Medra. So thank you very much for all the partners who made this session possible. Startup Magazine is a Bahrain-based community and publication for startups in the Middle East. Exclusive events, in-depth workshops, insightful content, and informative news. Make sure to follow them on all social media at Startup Magazine. There are several upcoming workshops as well, similar to this one. If you want to have any more information, make sure to visit the website startupmagazine.com/workshops. This session might be recorded in the media, and the workshop itself does not reflect the views of the United States Department of State or the strategic partners. So let's get into the agenda. This session is casual. Now, in ideal circumstances, we'd have all been together and had a physical get-together. Interactive, I like sessions to be interactive, get questions anytime. So please don't let the virtual aspect of this stop you from interacting. You'll get the most from these sessions if you ask any questions you have, if you let us know a bit more about your business and what you're looking for. I'll go over the agenda the next slide, but you will notice that the scope is quite broad. And over the course of today and the next day, it will help us to know what you are looking for so we can narrow it down a bit more. We might have a guest speaker tomorrow. We're going to talk to you about mentorships again tomorrow. And if you have any more questions, anything we didn't mention today, feel free to email workshops@startupmagazine.com. These are some internships. And again, if you are interested in any internships, feel free to email the same email, workshops@startupmagazine.com. Networking events. You can have some more info. Again, it's on the same website. There are gatherings, panels. Obviously, these days, everything is virtual, so we'll see what's being planned. Stay tuned on the website. Make sure you subscribe to their mailing list and get in touch. I'll move on to the next slide. And just a quick bit about myself. My name is Ehsan Al-Kooheji. It's a pleasure to be hosting this workshop today. I've been in the tech industry for the past 20 years, worked with many people in Bahrain, and always love to interact with startups, people working on their own business, sharing ideas and supporting any way I can. So again, it's a pleasure to be here today with everyone. Now, let's get to the gist of it. This is today's outline. And I think for a lot of you, you joined based on the title, but it's important to know what we're getting into. So I'd like to touch into all the topics we're going to talk about today. And let me again mention, we have a broad audience today. So we are catering for people who are new, who didn't start their business, for people who have established businesses. And we're also covering a wide range of technology topics. So when we talk about technology, there can be 100 different topics we can talk about. And each one of those topics can take a day or even more to talk about. So what we are doing today is covering the basics of multiple topics so that you, as a business owner or potential startup, can think about the areas which you might not have thought about before and focus on the ones you need, and definitely move on to more consultations in the future, ask the right questions, and sort of pick and choose what you like from these topics to focus on later on. So if we very briefly look at what we have here for day one and day two, day one is called extending your customer reach. And if I were to summarize it, it's basically about getting on the web. We did some quick unofficial surveys and found that most startups in Bahrain don't have websites. They might have a social media Instagram account which doesn't have a strategy. So we're going to focus today on getting you on the internet. Basically how to make your website, what that means, the basics of getting a domain. It might be already known to some of you, but we hopefully will get into some details which other people don't. We'll touch on mobile applications. We'll talk about social media, obviously, and we'll talk about online marketing and communicating with your customers. So tools you can use to communicate with your customers. That's it for day one. Day two tomorrow has more broad topics, but again, we will touch on them as an introduction. So we are going to talk about payments, online payment systems, touchless payment systems. We're going to talk about data analytics, security, bookkeeping tools, which is basically accounting. We're going to talk about CRM, ERP systems, training your customers. And then we're going to talk about new technologies, which are presenting a paradigm shift in the way businesses deal with things. So everyone's heard about cloud. We're going to talk about what cloud is, what it means. We're going to talk about automation, online software as a service, productivity tools, internal business communications, and so on. And again, the aim of this is to give you a sort of overview on many broad topics so that you can go back and think about what technologies you can use in your business. So no one else knows your business as well as yourself. When you understand what's out there, what's available to you, you know, something might click and you might say, okay, we need to focus on this. We might need to focus on automation to get something done in the business or in the startup. And I'll be happy to talk to you after these sessions as well in case you have any more questions. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Extend your customer reach. And to start, we're basically going to talk about using the internet, websites, domains, and hosting. Now, I don't know if we can do a quick look around the participants and see who has or doesn't have a website. That would be helpful. Can you all just in chat let me know if you do have websites? If you can also please let me know what your business is and how many employees you have. So that will help me get a feel for the different businesses we have around the room and maybe cater towards some of those industries. So that I would appreciate a lot. And moving on, we will talk about why you should go online, what a website is, what a domain name is, and web hosting and building your website. So these are the main topics. And I can see someone does have a domain, a couple of people don't have a website, and one does. So it seems to be mixed around the room, but that's good. Even if you do have a website, we're going to cover some basics you might not have seen before. But the answer to why you should go why you should go online. Okay, the question is why you should have a website. It might be obvious, but the answer I'll give you is because it's so simple, right? So when you think about going online, a lot of people think it's difficult, there are obstacles, or it might be costly. And the fact is, you can have a website in 5 minutes and for free. There are many options to do so, but I just want to let you know that there isn't an obstacle, and there are many tools which will help us. I think this is a slide I love to show, and a lot of people don't get this analogy because it was never explained in a certain way. And even people who do have websites, even companies who went to web developers and came up with a website, sometimes struggle with these concepts, with what the domain is. I have clients coming to me and they're like, we have a website, but in reality they have a domain name, and they send us the domain logins and details, and we can't get their files because their files are somewhere else. So let me just look at this picture and let me explain in detail the analogy of houses, right? So if you would imagine that the internet is where people live, right? It's your streets. You always have an address. That address is your domain name. So it's important to note on the internet that owning a domain name has nothing to do with the content of the website itself, and is actually more important than the content, because if you lose the content, you can always put it back up on the same domain. But if you don't have that domain, if you go to a developer and they buy the domain for you and it's not in your name, then you can always lose everything you have, especially if you market that domain and let your clients know what it is. So step one for any business is to acquire a domain name, even if you don't plan on going online with the website anytime soon, even if it's just an idea. The price is so low that it's worth going for it. I'm talking about $10 basically a year to get a domain name. So that's the first thing you should be doing, and that's what we're going to be talking about in a bit. Let's talk about web hosting. Once you have that domain, it needs to point somewhere, right? So similar to the analogy of addresses, if you have an address, it goes along with land, but when it comes to internet, it doesn't. They're not related. You actually need to buy that piece of land separately, right? So you actually need to buy an address, you need to buy the land, and finally, you need to build that website on top of it. This is a look at domains. So as I mentioned, the domain is the first thing we need, and to me, the most important, and consists of multiple parts. Now, everyone has seen this. This is basic, right? But I wanted to show this to focus on the extensions. Obviously, the .com. And a lot of people, when they go to search for a name, they get frustrated because they can't find a domain name matching their business, right? So I'm just looking at the chat here, and I see a message from Huda, who's the director of Richmond Advisory Services. Now, if you search for richmond.com, you're going to find that it's not available. Moreover, if it's for sale, you're going to find that it might cost around $10,000 because it's a simple, easy name. Now, the fact is, all easy names on the internet have been taken years ago. So all dictionary words, all short domains less than 7 or 8 letters, they're all gone, even if it's gibberish. Now, you do have options to go for .org, depending on your industry, as we see here in chat. But again, if you're commercial, up to now, with all the different extensions that came up, .com isn't the only one. I'm sure you have seen multiple different options. Nothing matches the professionalism and strength of .com. We do have a local option. So for a lot of you based in Bahrain, you can go with .bh. So you have .com, you have .bh. .bh makes sense if you are focused on the Bahraini market. If you know you are staying in Bahrain and you don't have any plans to grow in the future, right? So you're not going to go to the Middle East, you're not going to be global anytime soon, then .bh makes perfect sense and is actually recommended more than .coms in many cases. And of course, there are other extensions which make sense for certain industries. So if you are a consultancy, you can get .consultancy. You can get .travel if you're focused on tourism. And again, I see some people have different markets in the chat, and you can think about these, and I'll show you briefly how you can get it. To get a .bh domain, the only option at the moment, until the system is set up with the TRA, is to go through Batelco. So again, it doesn't cost that much, but it costs considerably more than the .com option. You need to pay 15 dinars to set it up. You need to pay a monthly 3 BD, have a Batelco line. You need to have a commercial registration. You need to wait for the TRA to approve that domain to make sure it matches your CR. So it's not quite as let's say, open as the .coms. If you want a .com, all you need to do is go to a website, search for it, pay for it, and again, within a few minutes, it's yours. .com costs approximately $10 per year, and all you need is a credit card to get it set up. Now, there are many options, many websites to go for. The one most people heard about is GoDaddy. I personally use Namecheap and Hover. None of these are bad. You know, you can, if you already have an account with any of them, you can continue using it. If you don't, GoDaddy is usually more friendly to new people. Just be careful because they try to sell you or upsell you many things if you don't know what you're doing. So you go to buy the domain, but then they offer you 5 or 6 services before you check out. As long as you ignore all of that, you should be fine. It's safe, it's secure, and it's a good option. As I said, I use Namecheap for those who wanted to know. And the bonus point in addition to this is that all of these services right now have consolidated, and they also offer hosting, and they also offer email. Now, I want to mention something before going hands-on, or maybe I'll do it when I do go hands-on, is what you can do if your name is not available, okay? Now, I don't have these in slides, but I will talk about them and talk about the importance of getting a short name and a name which is reflective of your business. So let's go to a website, and I'm going to share my browser here. I hope everyone can see this. And let's go to GoDaddy, right? Which is the most accessible common name everyone knows. And again, searching for a domain is as easy as typing it out. So I can write testing, I can come up with a business name, let's say Moon Consultancy, and search for that. So I just made up a name, right? Moon Consultancy, and it tells me that name is taken. Now, what do you do when the main name you need is taken? Now, these guys make it easy for you. They provide you alternatives immediately. So you can see here that while moon.com is taken, you can actually get moon-consultancy.com. You can get Moon Consultant. So they start offering you these alternatives. They offer you suggestions, you know, to add the. They offer you different extensions like .store or .co. My opinion about all of these is that in most cases, in 90% of the cases, none of these is as strong as the .com, right? The .com is powerful. It gives you a certain sense of professionalism that you do not get with the others. Unless your business is exactly under any of these subcategories. So if this was a store and you get .store, that sort of makes sense, but I'd still prefer the .com. And I'm mentioning this because in certain cases, you do need to think about whether you should go for the .ph. And it's also important because this is a long-term decision. Once you get a domain and once you start marketing it and getting it out there and printing it on business cards, on letterheads, on stationery, it's very, very hard to change it, right? So you need to get it right from the beginning. This decision is worth taking your time. It's worth talking to people about and getting the right name out there. In chat, we've got Layla. Layla is a UI UX designer, and she went with a website called brandio.io. Now, I'll tell you why that makes sense. Again, the .com is definitely taken, right? It's a short word. But Layla went with .io. Now, .io is one of the newer domain extensions, and it's been associated a lot with tech, with design, with these sort of out-of-the-box solutions. So for someone who's a designer and who's offering design app, design services, templates, it makes perfect sense, right? And if you look at the name as well, the business is called brandio.io, and you have that repetition of IO before and after the dot, so it's nice as well. These are just some points to think about. Looking at the other options we have, you can see there are tons of them, tons of extensions. But again, remember the .ph option, look at all the .com options, and get the domain. Once you pick a name, buying it is as simple as adding it to the cart, going to checkout, they're going to ask you for your details. And remember, I mentioned earlier that they're going to offer you all these different services, right? So GoDaddy likes to say, do you want full protection? Do you want the ultimate security and protection? You can just say, no, thanks. If it's free, we can go for the website building, hosting, emails. You can just skip all that for now. Don't complicate it. Go to the cart, make an account, and pay for it. Now, once you buy the domain, it's yours for life. All you need to remember is that the credit card details, you enter here, the account you create, the username, password, never forget it, keep it safe. We're going to talk about security later during this program. And remember to keep the credit card updated. I've seen many people, I've seen multinational companies lose domains and then try to get them back because they use someone's credit card, right? Remember, when you're a company, a lot of companies don't have credit cards. So use personal credit cards, and then that person might be someone in IT, might be one of the managers. They leave, they don't get the renewal emails, they forget to update their credit card, and a year passes, the domain is gone, someone else jumps on it. When you don't pay for a domain, there are hundreds of automated poaching bots whose job is to just take that domain and try to resell it because it just costs them $10, right? It doesn't cost anything. So they go and buy it as soon as it expires because they know someone had it. And then they try to sell it for you again for 100, for 1,000, for $10,000, depending on how big your business is. Layla recommends name.com. Name.com is great for domains and HostGator for hosting. I'll touch on some of these services in the next slide. But generally speaking, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about when it comes to domains. Someone says that happened to me. Yes, it's very common. I mean, losing a domain, I've personally dealt with many businesses who have lost domains. So it's not uncommon. And that's why I thought I should, make a special point to talk about it. With that said, I'd love to see if you guys have any questions. Feel free to put them in chat. If you want a video chat as well, I think you can send a request to the organizers. We have the team here ready. But before we move on, I'd love to hear any questions you have, anything's not clear, either about this topic or anything else you'd like to see us talk about. So let's wait a few seconds to see if any questions come in before we jump into web hosting. That's the next slide. Oops. Question from Amina. What option would I have taken since Moon Consultancy was taken? I would go with the .bh and not the dash. Okay, so between those two, between Moon-Consultancy or moonconsultancy.bh. I'm assuming it's a Bahraini business. I'm assuming it's not multinational. It doesn't have branches outside of Bahrain. That dash hurts. Okay, so this is all subconscious to the mind. No one looks at a domain and says it's ugly, right? People don't have, ratings for domains and look at them and like, oh, this is a beautiful domain and we love that. But subconsciously, with years and years of using the internet, we have been trained to assess domains in a way. And based on that, we sort of feel if we judge businesses based on their domains. Even if we don't know, a dash is good or bad, we do that. Another question we have is, are domains used to display products? Well, the domain is used to show your website, which I'm going to in the next slide. The website itself, which your domain opens, can be used to show your products, or it can be as simple as your logo. You can have a domain which people open up and it just shows your logo until you are ready to have some content there. Obviously, different companies have different content. Some have products, some have contact information, some have a more of a brochure type of layout. So I think it's up to you, but getting that domain gives you the freedom and flexibility to show whatever you want to show anytime in the future. Rasha is asking, does the domain selection affect SEO? Yes, it does. Shorter domains are better than longer domains. So if you are going for, again, Moon Consultancy, and you want to show you're in Bahrain, moonconsultancy.bh is better than Moon Consultancy Bahrain. In any cases, you should definitely avoid going more than 10 characters. You should try to avoid the dashes, try to avoid numbers in the domain, be as short as possible. And if the domain includes something relevant to your business, right? Russia, you're doing photography. So if you have photo in the domain name, it can be Russia photo, for example, that also helps with SEO. Now, no one knows the truth behind SEO because Google will never admit to what they do. They won't tell you the secrets, but based on guessing, this is what we think matters and doesn't matter. Let's move on to the next slide if there are no more questions. Web hosting. So we spoke about domains, right? And if you remember, the domain is the address which points you to hosting. Now, once you get the domain, you need a place for your actual site to exist. In the old days, let's go back, to corporate days. Companies used to buy a server, a physical server, which was about this big, and they'd slot it into a rack, and they'd install, Linux or Windows for servers on it, and create all these different systems so they can then put their files, right? It's called a web server. They put all the website files, which can be the text, the images, and so on, and they build a website. And when you visit that company's website, you actually have a physical connection from your computer all the way to their physical branch, to the server room, to that server. As things progressed, as the internet grew, companies started offering hosting services so that you do not need to buy that server, right? In the 90s, when I was a kid, I used to have a server in my room. So I actually had a computer which was connected to the internet, and people could come and view the website on that computer. Today, you go to companies who buy huge server farms. They have huge data centers which are maintained. In those data centers, they might have 1,000 racks. In each rack, they have 10 machines. One of those machines is split into smaller parts, and they are happy to sell you one of those parts for as little as $2 a month. So obviously, we've come a long way. That bit I talked about is called shared hosting. I'm going to talk in the next slide about the differences between shared hosting and dedicated hosting. And sorry for that, I kept it on the browser. Sarah, thank you for letting me know that we are still on the browser screen. I came back to the web hosting slide. I'll give you a few seconds to read what I was talking about, which is that your website needs a place to live, that traditionally you have to buy physical spaces. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about shared, dedicated, different kinds of hosting, basically. So what types of hosting are there? As a startup, you don't really need to worry about most of these. You usually go to any of the websites you spoke about earlier. So if you want to GoDaddy or if you want to name.com, you'd see that, remember when we bought the domain, they offered you the hosting. They said, do you want to host the website here? And usually that's the easiest option. And if you're doing it yourself, you don't need to worry about going to a different host and looking at different options. But it's good to know what options are out there. And I've outlined here the pluses and minuses of each. Shared hosting is basically what I spoke about earlier. When you get that piece of a server, which is part of a bigger server, which is shared between different people, essentially to save on cost, right? These hosting companies have found that for most businesses, for 90% of companies, businesses, or even individuals going online, you don't need that many resources. You don't need this heavy machine, which costs a lot of money and is dedicated for you. So they are happy using software to give you a piece of bigger machines. It's affordable. It's easy to get and start. Again, the setup for most of these is less than 5 minutes. You just go, add it to your cart, and they email you all the login details you or your web developer might need. The issues you might face is that it's not sophisticated. So as you get into more complicated websites, might be e-commerce websites, might be websites which integrate with other services, you don't have control over that server. But as I said, for 90% of businesses, shared hosting is enough. If you do need that extra level, you go to dedicated hosting. And for companies, dedicated hosting is a must, because you don't want the effects of shared hosting being with other people on one physical machine to affect your company, right? But it is more expensive. It does require IT knowledge. You need to know, if you get a dedicated server, how to set it up, how to get your website on it. So you do need IT, and you might need staff, although there is an exception, which we will get to in the next slide. A good hybrid between shared and hosting, shared and dedicated hosting, is VPS hosting. Okay, so VPS hosting stands for virtual private hosting. And in essence, what it is shared hosting, but with special virtualization software, which keeps your files and resources safe from the effects of other people on the same physical space. So again, let me explain this. You have a physical server, but using software, they can make it look like its own physical independent machine, which is not affected by any of the other machines. Finally, you have cloud hosting, and cloud hosting is more of a general term, which in some cases actually is a virtual private hosting. But in many cases, especially with new services coming up, I'm sure you've all heard about AWS and the cloud and the variants available from Microsoft and Google as well. The cloud essentially means that you can grow and you can get additional resources. And when I said dedicated hosting is not needed for 90% of customers, I'd say cloud hosting for websites is not needed for 99% of businesses. But it is an option, and it's good to be aware of its availability if you are at that size. If you are huge and you have more needs coming up in the future, and you know, you are maybe a tech company who's building applications online, then that's when you talk about cloud hosting. Now, any type of hosting, be it shared or be it dedicated or cloud, can come with management. Okay. The shared hosting we spoke about earlier is not that powerful, but it comes with an option. That option is management. Now, most providers have opted to include managed hosting in the platform itself. And what that essentially means is that you don't need to worry about the security of your server. So you can imagine if you put something on the internet, you need to have it updated. You need to keep it patched. You need to maintain certain software updates. When you go to shared hosting today, you don't need to worry about these things. When you go to dedicated hosting, many hosts have now offered management as an option. So if you are to pay the prices for managed hosting, maybe $100 a month, they would charge you another $20 to get management. Same for VPS hosting. If you go for VPS, you can add management on top of that. And that's a sort of hassle-free way of getting the additional resources without worrying about, or without having the limitation of shared hosting and being on a server with other people. From all these options, my recommendation for startups, if cost is an issue at all and you just want to get online, you go with the cheapest shared hosting offered by your domain provider, so you have everything in one place. If you do want to do things right, if you think your website is going to get lots of hits, if you're going to go for e-commerce, if you have heavy loads like photos or videos, then I'd recommend going with a VPS. VPS prices start at around $30, about that much. Let's say $40 with management. So, you know, I think it's affordable for startups as well. And let's get to email. So having covered domains, having covered websites, web hosting, everyone needs an email, right? And this is where picking the domain name comes in play. Now, people nowadays are on mobile most of the time. Visits to websites, if you're not offering something direct, if you're not selling something, have gone down, but everyone uses email, right? Everyone knows your email. And if you are a business and you've got that name on your business card, then that domain becomes very, very important, because now everyone is reading it whenever they email you. I like to have short names. I like to have my name, Ehsan, at my company, KoohejiSystems.com. I stress the point that you should never use a Gmail or any of the other free emails for your business. It's easy. Some of you already have it. You started it. But as we've shown, the barrier to entry to having a domain and getting email is so low that there's no reason you should, go for it immediately. I've seen companies lose business because they use Gmail. And yes, I have seen companies use Gmail. Again, because it's available, it's always been there. And when you have something up and running and you've used it for years, there's a barrier to moving to something else. You're like, I don't want to move. I don't feel like moving it. But you can move at any time. You can forward all your old emails to the new domain if you don't have it already. Honestly, this is something you should be doing immediately. If there's one takeaway from this workshops for anyone who doesn't have a domain and email, it's this slide. This will really help your business. The options we have on screen here are ways of getting email on your domain. Again, let me go back to the old days. In the past, just like you bought a web server and had to physically put it somewhere, you needed to buy an email server. So if you wanted email, if you wanted your own name and your own email, which is not a Gmail or a Hotmail as it used to be, you had to buy that server and keep it at home somewhere and configure it to receive emails on your own domain, which you bought from somewhere else. Today, companies like Google and Microsoft offer you email for as little as $5 a month. And companies like Zoho offer it for free. If you like the Gmail interface, you can continue to use it with G Suite by simply going and creating a Google for Business account and paying that $5 a month. Let me look at the questions for a minute. Huda has the domain, but it's not convenient. And she asks customers to email Hotmail. So Huda, my recommendation is, as I mentioned right now, is to move to one of these three services we have mentioned here. So step one for you would be to think about the domain you have. Are you really happy with it? Think about the things I mentioned about the .com, the .ph, and that would be your first decision. Once you decide on whether you want to keep that domain, is it short enough? Is it professional enough? This is an opportunity to go up to something new. Since you're gonna give people a new email, you might as well give them a new domain. So you do have that option. Once you have that domain set up, you need to go to G Suite. I recommend G Suite because it's as easy as Hotmail, as Batul said. Huda, you're using Hotmail. So if you go to Office 365, you're actually gonna have the same interface. Nothing changes from your end. You still go to webmail, you still open it in a browser, you can get it on your phone. They will help you with the setup. Once you pay, they'll guide you step by step on what you need to press on every screen to get that email configured. And it takes less than an hour to get it up and running. G Suite is my favorite because it's part of the Google ecosystem, but that's a personal preference. Zoho is great because it's free, but I don't like the interface that much. But if you don't mind their interface, if you don't need that Gmail fast responsive interface, Zoho isn't bad. It's pretty nice, and again, you can get it up and running. And see, if you're not happy with it, you can switch to any of these other services at any time. Okay. If you're worried about the old emails you have, you can always access that account. You can back it up. You can export them somewhere else. And if you have an existing Hotmail you are using, that stays. that will always be active, and it will continue to receive emails and forward new ones and allow you to search for older emails. And there are migration tools. I'm not going to get into them now, but if anyone has more questions, you can hit me up later on, and we can talk about how to migrate your older emails to new services. So to me, the best one is Google, but they're all equally good. And the nice thing about them, as you see in this slide, is that they all offer more. So that the $5 I mentioned, and the free access you have with Zoho and the Microsoft subscription, actually gives you so much more than email. And I'm sure you've seen these services, you've used some of them, you've had Google Sheets, or you've used Google Docs online to manage to manage your business. Even on a personal level, we use these a lot. Now, when you actually pay, you get the benefit of having these managed under one account and linked to your corporate domain. So, I think compared to where we were in the past and how much people had to pay to get a server and get all these different services, we've definitely come a long way. And having all this for $5 a month is a steal. One bonus I'd like to mention with Microsoft is that they also give you copies at one of their subscription levels. I don't think it's the $5 one. It might be the $10 one. But you get to download all the Office suite. So for everyone who relies on Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you can actually get the online subscription and then download a copy of the software you use on your machine and link that with the cloud version as well. So you actually have Microsoft Word on your computer, on your laptop, but you also have it on the browser, so you can access it from any device, and then your files will be shared as well. Let me take a quick look at any questions we have. I think we answered everything so far. Let me take a question from Sarah Jamal. Now, Sarah has a ladies' salon, and she has a website, but it's not used that much. Now, for most people, the website is there. It's not being used. I've seen that many times. Let's look at the questions one by one. Do you need a different license for online sales? You don't need a different license. As long as your main license covers what you're selling. We do have licenses in Bahrain for virtual CRs if you haven't started yet. But for established businesses, people who are selling online don't have any issues going with online sales. Obviously, you need to build a store. You need to have that e-commerce system in place, and that takes some effort. But you should be fine when it comes to licensing. Now, the difference between selling products on websites or Instagram, and I assume you mean the Instagram platform to sell products, right? Everyone can everyone can take photos of products and put them on their Instagram account, and then people get in touch, they message you, you reply to them by WhatsApp, you might ask them to pay. Payments in the past was difficult. Now we have benefit pay. Again, that's not the same as having an e-commerce website, which traditionally is, the model we're used to from companies like Amazon, right? When you go to US websites, how to add something to carts, go to that cart, enter your credit card details, put in your shipping address, and check out. So to get that functionality, you don't do it on Instagram, you do it on a proper website. And it makes more sense when you have a lot of products. If you have multiple retail hair products, for example, Sarah, you can actually put them all on the website, have them organized in different categories. People can pick and choose, they can add them to the cart, come back to them later. So, it's much more interactive. And I think a lot of people prefer to shop on the computer. Mobiles are successful in taking over social media, and you've got your apps. But when it comes to shopping, until today, it's been shown that people prefer to be on an actual computer, laptop, or desktop. And people prefer to enter their credit card details on a computer, not so much on the phone, That's just the behavior we've grown accustomed to. Now, final question, do I think websites are better suited to certain fields than others? I think everyone should have a website. Again, every company, every business, every field should have a website, even if that website is nothing but your logo, okay? Even if you give people your email, they might try to access that website. You don't need to tell them I have a website. They're going to check, and they might look and type it in and find that it doesn't exist. That immediately detracts from your business. But if you do have a website which says, this is us, this is what we do, it can be one paragraph, that goes a long way to increase your professionalism and give you more credit in the market. The one thing you should never do is have a coming soon page. There's no reason for it. If you are coming soon, you might as well wait until it's ready. And people won't be waiting for that coming soon page. So let's move on to a small technical bit, okay? And I try to keep this workshop non-technical so it can be accessible to most people. But I'd like to talk about this because in my years of doing business, in the past 10 years of running this company, this is the question which keeps coming up. What is DNS? What do these 3 letters mean? What does this have to do with what we talked about earlier, the domain and the web hosting, which is the land you exist on? And to answer very briefly, the DNS system is what you use to link your domain to your website. And you need to remember that the domain is completely separated from the website. I mentioned earlier examples of people who come and they have the login for GoDaddy and they're like, this is our website. Can you please, get us all the files from someone we used to work with, an old developer or someone who helped us out. And when you actually check, you find out that they only have the domain and they don't have the website files. The DNS system is basically a configuration screen where you link that domain you might have bought from GoDaddy or name.com to the hosting which you might have also bought from GoDaddy. So even if you buy a domain and hosting from the same provider, the DNS still needs to be set up, although in 99% of the cases, they do that for you. So, they're like, you bought the hosting from us, we might as well configure it for you. But it helps to know that it exists. And it looks something like this. It's a system which links different names, readable names, to the server addresses. And it's used for the website and the email as well. So when you go and get email from one of these providers we mentioned earlier, and you have your domain somewhere else, right? You have your domain from GoDaddy, you have your email from Gmail. Gmail is going to ask you to edit those DNS records so that the servers on the internet know that your email is with Google and not with GoDaddy. That's effectively, in essence, the gist of it. Again, nothing to worry about, just something to remember and keep in mind. It exists. It's an important part of owning domains and managing them. Okay. Now, any questions about these parts? Questions about websites, the domains, the email setup? Anything else you have before we go for a break? Let's wait for a few seconds and see if anyone wants to ask about these parts. We have a question from Isma. I want to increase awareness about my business. I have no idea how to promote on Instagram and how to increase my target market and people who are actually interested. Now, we will touch upon targeted marketing. We will talk about services you can use for your domain. But I think in essence, what you're looking for is social media marketing. Which after we discuss the main topics of in this workshop, we will maybe have a chance to, or you will have a chance to reach out to service providers who can help you out with that. or learn how to do it yourself. So we will talk about that. A question is, how about adding BH at the end of domain names? For example, novemberbh.com. I personally prefer november.bh as opposed to novemberbh.com. It's good if you're focused in Bahrain to have it, but again, since that .bh option is available, there is a slight barrier to entry of getting the account, the .bh from Batelco, and paying that 3 dinars a month, but I definitely think that it's worth it. We have a question which says, would you recommend using a domain with your name if you are a designer to show product furniture, design services, and so on? So it's a personal and business one. I don't recommend considering it a personal one, but I don't see an issue with using your name as your brand name. So don't think of it as your personal name. Think of it as your brand. Before you go into the website naming, Mariam, consider the name you're using to be your brand name. So it can be Mariam Design or you know, something more unique than that. But that name stays with you and eventually becomes the name of your CR. It becomes the name of a big business. Many people use personal names to start businesses up to the point where they don't work in the business anymore, but their name remains. So I don't see an issue with using your name, but consider it a brand and think about it from that point of view. And let's take one more question. Sarah Abdelrazak wants to upgrade her website from static to dynamic. We will discuss this in the next section and the different options we have for building websites. It's definitely possible if you have the domain name, then making the switch using a developer. Those are things we will talk about later. And finally, Huda is asking, how do I transfer email? That's a bit more technical. Maybe we can discuss it, you know, after these sessions. And how to make the website popular. We'll talk about SEO, advertising tomorrow. Let's take a quick 10-minute break. I'll be back in exactly 10 minutes. So I look forward to continue this in a bit. Thank you guys, and see you in 10 minutes. Okay, we're just about ready to get back to it. Can you guys hear me? Just want to make sure we didn't mess this up during the break. Thanks. And 5 seconds. Now, oh, it beeps. I don't know if you hear that. That's cool. During the break, I found out I can actually draw on this. So yeah, get ready for some art. Oh, shouldn't have done that. The next section is about building websites. So we talked about the domains, we talked about hosting, but once you get those, you effectively got the equivalent of empty land, right? You have a nice address, you have a piece of land. What do you build on it? And before I get into how or the tools to build a website, I'm going to talk about these stages. These stages are relevant to everyone, small or big, because everyone goes through them. Now, smaller companies might not think about it, but you always need to plan what you're going to build and go through the different stages of building a website. The bigger companies have thorough, or let's say very long periods of planning where you meet with the clients, gather the requirements, gather the data. The website itself can have hundreds of different sections. So you do need to decide on what goes where. You need to design it. And again, design is something we most of the time do without or before even getting to coding. So having your website, let's say, designed as a mock-up is one of the more important phases of getting it created. And then we get into development. Development is something very technical. The coders usually take that design, go away for a long time, and then come back when you have something you're ready to launch. And again, most websites require ongoing maintenance. Now, this will not be something you need to worry about as a startup or even as smaller business, because of the options we will talk about going forward. But I thought it's very useful to discuss it and talk about it. This section is about building your website, so we will talk about. I just talked about how the website is built, but then we'll talk about whether you should have an app and the different options we have for building that website. One of the more important terms you should remember is responsive design. Nowadays, I don't have the latest statistics, but I think everyone agrees that the majority of people access websites from their mobile phones, right? And you've all had experiences where you go to a website and it just doesn't look right. It just looks like a copy of that, the bigger version you see on the in the middle screen here. And oops. And that big version requires you to zoom in and out to go to different sections. The menu isn't quite as accessible. But as time went on during the past few years, more and more websites look like what you see here on the mobile screen, where it's the same content, right? You have to keep in mind, this was not redesigned. It's not a different version of the website. It's actually the exact same site. If you scroll through it, you see the same content. It's just been resized at different screen sizes to fit what you see. So the system, the responsive design system, decides on what you see on different screens. If you look at the background, the big computer monitor, you see you have this nice background image with the blue lines, right? If you look at the iPad, you feel that you still have the same layout. You still have 4 different colored icons, but then you lose what's on the sides. And as you go smaller, as you go to the mobile, things start moving around and shifting around. Nowadays, no one should build a website unless it's responsive. And I've seen companies, even last year, build or launch websites in Bahrain which are not responsive. Big mistake, definitely something to keep in mind, and in most cases does not cost that much more if we're going to use the tools I will show you next. But something to keep in mind, if you're talking to developers, someone who's making your website, if you are using a tool, most of them will have the option of responsive design. And the only thing to keep in mind is that when you create layouts, if you are going to go into details about what to show on your website, remember that it won't look the same on different screens, or at least you can't show it the same way on different screens. You can't say, I want my logo to cover half of the screen, but then if it's on mobile, that's going to be too small. So on mobile, it needs to be actually bigger. Just a term to keep in mind, one of the most important terms when it comes to web development. Now, should you have a website or should you have an application? Let me talk to you a bit about the trends I've been seeing. Apps came out or became popular maybe 10 years ago. During the peak of their popularity, 2012, 2013, everyone wanted an application. People actually stopped making websites and making corporate apps. A lot of businesses went that route because that was basically the market. Everyone was going for applications. As we moved from 2014 up to 2018, the app market became saturated. And the behavior seen globally is that people just don't want to download apps anymore. If you released an application 5 years ago in Bahrain, people would be 10 times more excited to download it than they are today. If you release an application today, you really need to force and spoon feed people and just pull them and beg them to download that app, because there have been so many applications. It's nothing new. And if you don't have any additional functionality, which people really need, they're not going to be incentivized to give you that screen real estate. So for some reason, even though it's free, you can have tons of applications and doesn't cost anything to download. People feel this weight of adding more apps on their phones. That's not to say you shouldn't have one. I mentioned earlier that you should always have a website, right? So it's not a question of either or. At a certain time, it was. There was a time where people said the web is dying and it's not going to be there anymore. But obviously that's not true. Today, the web is thriving more than ever. And it's actually applications which are starting to suffer a bit. But when I say suffer, again, that's not really accurate, because if you look at trends, both websites and applications and the internet in general is growing and is going to continue to grow, right? So it might not be the same accelerated growth we saw when apps first came up, but the internet and the web and applications, they are the future. So you as a business owner need to keep thinking about these. And if you're not on board, you definitely need to be on board of the website train, and you need to think about the application train. And let me talk about a bit more about apps and what building applications entails. So you do remember what we spoke about earlier on websites, right? And the process we go through for building websites. When you build an app, it can become complicated, a lot more complicated than building a website. When you build a website, you have the option of going to hundreds of freelancers. You have established companies. You have website builders, which we'll touch on, which you can use to do it yourself. You don't need someone to help you out. You can gain that experience in a day, watch some videos, and get your website up and running. The barrier to entry is very, very low. But when you go to applications, the barrier to entry is multiples that of a website. So if you do go for a website, this is something for later. You will engage a company to help you out. And when you do, I recommend keeping it simple. The biggest mistake I see people do in general, whether they go for a corporate app or a personal project, is that they try to cram it with many features, which complicates the development process, increases costs, and makes it difficult to basically get out there. The best model for building applications is to do something fast, market it, get people to download it, and then introduce updates. And everyone gets app updates, right? Everyone loves when you have this app you always use, and you get this update with new features, and they list the things they've changed, or more often than not, they just say we strive to keep the app updated and give you the best features. But I won't go much more into that except to show you the differences of building an app and a website. This is similar to what we saw earlier. This was the website stages. So if we have 5 circles here, over here we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's just more complicated, just has more steps. It needs more work and it costs more. And that's not to say that you can't get a developer or you can't learn to do it yourself, but it's something to keep in mind before deciding that you need an application, that it is a long journey and you sort of need to know what you're doing a lot more than simply getting a website. My advice remains, get a website as soon as possible. If you make that decision to go online, if you don't have anything at the moment and you need a domain and you need that email and you need a website, you can be up and running in as little as a day, if you know what you're doing. But if you're an established business and you have a website, but you're thinking about making an application, keep in mind that's a very big decision, and you might need to go through several more steps to get there. This is just something I wanted to show you. It's what a website looks like in the back end. And I don't expect people to code websites themselves nowadays. Developers, techies already know this, and they go into the details and create websites. But I thought it's interesting for everyone to see that essentially a website is just text. All those images you see, all the different, let's say, content and interactivity and animations and sometimes video, all it comes down to is this. What you see on screen right now is what sort of transforms and gives you that. I can change one number here, which will change the color of the website from red to blue. And that's what developers essentially do. Although today we have more tools to simplify that and make it easier. Now, you don't need to worry about that because we have website builders, and I'll show you a few. And essentially what website builders are is a way for you to drag and drop and see what your website looks like as you build it. Okay, so if you just look at the example I have here, it's a website for a cafe, and the builder would look something like this. This isn't a real one, but all of them look similar to this, where you have your site on the right, and then on the left you have different options for things you can drag and actually drop into the site. So you can add text, you can add images, and they will take care of making sure it's responsive, right? So we spoke about responsive design, and if you look at the top of the site, you'll notice there are 3 icons. One looks like a laptop, the next one looks like a tablet, and then you have a mobile. As you click, it will show you live what your website actually looks like in these different views. So you can change the content. This effectively does make your website dynamic. So if you use a website builder, you can always go back and rebuild different pages. You can change headings, text. You can simply add sections, add pages, and that opens up, let's say, a lot of room for anyone to learn how to do it. There is some basic learning involved, but again, all these services give you tutorials. We actually had a workshop last year where we covered in depth how to build a website using Squarespace, which is one of the services. And what I'll do here very quickly is just open up the browser again and show you what options we have. So let me go, for example, to Squarespace, which I just mentioned. And Squarespace is, again, one of the most popular builders out there. Make a website. Let's see what they have here. What you need to get started. I mean, these are just examples of what you can create, and they have tons of templates which you can start with, so you don't need to start from scratch. Their main product is this one, create a website, and they talk more about how to use it, but they also offer options to sell products. And if you notice here, you can actually get a domain as well. And the interesting thing is now, as we mentioned domains earlier and getting one from one of the services offered, all these services are starting to consolidate and bring more value add to what they used to offer. GoDaddy used to only offer domains. Now they have hosting, they have email, and they have a website builder. So again, if you did go with GoDaddy, there's a website builder built in, which you can again pay a monthly fee like $5 to get and build your website. And they all function very similarly. Squarespace used to offer websites only. Now they let you create e-commerce websites, and now they sell domains as well. So, it doesn't really matter where you go. You can do an all-in-one. You can mix it up, get one service from one company and another service from another, and do that DNS setup we spoke about. And you can test them out. You can test multiple services and see which one works for you. So just looking at Squarespace, you can see they have different templates. You tell them what kind of website you have. So if I say, for example, I have a photography website, they might actually ask you what you're trying to do. Just give them any answers here to see what options are available. And they will immediately show you some very nice looking templates, which you can click on and start building immediately. All right, so these all look professional. They're all responsive. They're all very nice. And then they offer you more options as well. Now, Rasha, yes, you mentioned, Rasha in the chat mentioned that Squarespace's e-commerce is limited and they don't have payment options, which we might be using in Bahrain. We will talk about payment tomorrow, although not in depth on how to set it up, but I can talk to you about some local options we have and other websites which we can integrate. US websites like to use PayPal. PayPal isn't really usable for us. There are ways to get it. There is a method to link a Bahraini account to PayPal through BSB and get your money out of it. But with the fees they charge, with the way it looks, I don't think it's that suitable for the Bahraini market. For Bahraini e-commerce websites, I still recommend building it, going to a developer and building it. But again, there are website builders we can look at as well. I'll very quickly give you another option, which is Wix, just to see how similar these different services are. So Wix is again a free website builder, and you can see here that it's very similar to what we saw in Squarespace, and they have their templates as well. And if you go to the template website, you can sort by business, health, beauty. If I go to beauty and pick makeup and cosmetics, you will see that, again, they have dozens of options and you can view each one. You can see which one you like. And if you want to work on this, you click edit this website. This becomes your site. You change the logo, you put your content, and you're up and running. Let me jump back to the PowerPoint. Now, should you use these builders or should you get a developer? It depends. Again, building a website can be a very simple thing. Building a nice professional website, if you're a more complicated business, definitely requires outside help. The challenges in building websites is that it's sort of the Wild West out there. You get developers, everything from newly graduates, freelancers, outsourced companies in Asia. You got your Bahraini firms. You've got even European and Western companies, which some companies go to. You have agencies. You have pure developers. So it's a big mix. And one of the challenges companies face, this is more for bigger companies who have more demanding requirements, is that the price ranges for websites can be anywhere between let's say 100 dinars to 10,000 dinars for the same thing, and it makes it difficult to if you don't know who to go for, who to work with, it makes it difficult to pick maybe the best person to work with, pick the best company to engage with, or decide on whether you just want to learn and do it yourself. And I'd say it depends on your requirements, right? So just thinking about your website now, if it's just a simple small placeholder, and if you don't have that many pages, or you don't want interactivity, you don't want to sell products, then I think it makes sense to just go with the easiest website builder. Just have something up there. If you got your domain from GoDaddy, for example, then stick with GoDaddy, use their website builder and see what you can build using it. Try it out, have something up. And if you want to update it in the future, if you feel the need to improve the look of it, to expand on it anytime, you can always do that. Remember, you own your domain. And since you own that domain, there's no limit to what you can do on the website itself. Since you own the domain, you can give the development to another company, let them build something. And if sometime down the line, you don't like what they did, or you decide to shift to another developer, you do have that domain, and you can make that change. So advice for startups, try to do it yourself. Advice for, let's say, more demanding startups, companies, people who will rely on the website and not just have it as a placeholder, is to work with a developer. Options start with freelancers. We have a lot of good freelancers in Bahrain. We have a lot of smart students, graduates, UOB, mostly Polytechnic, very good skills. So if you can get in touch, if you know someone and they've done web media or a similar course, they can actually do all this for you and help you out, even if you're a smaller company. If you want to get in touch with more professional or let's say bigger companies with a bigger team to offer more services, sometimes you need a design which follows your very specific corporate brands. You need photography added on top of that as well, or maybe a video. And you need to make sure you have additional SEO or e-commerce involved. I think that's when you need to look into the local market, get different quotations, see what other companies offer, talk to them, and basically go with whoever you're more comfortable with to build the website. Now, let's take any questions you guys have about this section. We just covered websites and building websites. The next section is about social media. So if you have anything related to the web or building the web, please type it out in chat, or let us know if you'd like to talk on the camera. A question from Huda. What if I have a website and I want to develop an app to sell it? So I'm assuming, Huda, you mean develop an app to sell products, right? That's a bit more complicated because there are ways to link the website to the application. One thing we don't want to do is not replicate the website in your application. So you can't just build a website. Remember the responsive website we have, which works very well on mobile. There's no point in taking that exactly and just replicating it on the mobile. So building it is something separate. And again, even Apple and Google these days, they don't approve apps which are simply websites or copies of websites. Your app has to have some functionality. Huda clarifies that the app she mentioned is for banks. Well, that's something else. If you want to develop something, and let's say your app is not your business, but it's a product in itself, and that's, the majority of applications are products or service offers which you offer. So your business might be to make an application, or the application might be the core of your business. Imagine something like Talabat. That's a whole different scenario, which requires in-depth planning. It's a different discussion you have with the developers. You definitely need a team on board. Now, whether that's an in-house or an outsourced or a project with a company, that all really depends. So I won't get into that much more, but just remember it's a different scope than doing something for your business. Another question, can we have live chat in the website? Yes, we can have live chat, and I will mention some of the services we can use for live chats. Let me double check if that's today or tomorrow. That's tomorrow. So tomorrow we will, no, that's today actually. I'll talk later on today about some customer communication tools and the best way to interact with your customers from your website. What do you do if you have lots of bugs, and how to fix and so on? I think for that, definitely we need to look at what you have. There's no way to tell why you might be having issues with an existing website. It goes back to the original developer or how it was built, but anything can be fixed, anything can be changed. With the web, things are dynamic. So, you know, you always have to maybe think about how you can improve and update your website. Another question, if I have enough knowledge to use the website builder, why would I need to go to a developer? You wouldn't need to go to a developer if you have enough knowledge with the builder, until you feel that the builder is not giving you the flexibility to add something you want to add to the website. Does that make sense? So builders have a certain limit. At a certain point, you might or you might not reach the point where you think, I want to link this website to my sales, you know, cash register, for example. And for some reason, I want to display how many sales we've had today. So you get into the realm of more complex code, and you get into the realm of customized website content. I don't know if I can think of really good examples, but you know, to answer the question, that point is a point you will know as a business owner. You will feel the limitations of that website builder. You will feel the limitation either in flexibility, in functionality, or in design. You know, sometimes you might be like, I just don't like this cookie cutter approach of design. I feel like all websites look the same, which nowadays they do. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. So when you reach that point, you will know that you want to go to a developer to customize more, to create the vision you have in your mind, or the vision you want to work together to reach, which is more reflective of your business looks and functions. A question from Zinat. I want to do an online-based business about accessories and clothing. So what should be my first step if I want my own app or website? Your first step would definitely be creating that website. That website is, since you're doing an online sale business, so I'm assuming you're selling those accessories and clothing, your first step would be to, I think, go or decide on building an e-commerce website. And for something like this, for an online retailer, there are online builders which have the drag and drop and add your products. But again, for someone in Bahrain, for starting a business here and getting payments and interacting with the local market, I would recommend working with a local developer to build it. So I would say your first step, after getting the basics out of the way, the name, the company, the registrations, and so on, is to work with a developer to get that done. Question from Renad on social media. I'll answer this now and we'll talk about social media. Renad is using Facebook Manager to run newsfeed ads on Instagram. The target audience is other business. Can I target Instagram accounts that are businesses? Currently, I can target business account admins and specific demographics. Now, this question relates on targeted advertising, and maybe we'll talk a bit more in the next section on how social media works. But in effect, you decide on what demographics you want your advertising to reach. And I'm not sure if they have a classification for businesses only. I think they don't, but don't quote me on that. I haven't seen something specific to businesses, which does make it challenging if you only want to target businesses. But then there are other networks. So I don't know if you're targeting smaller businesses on Facebook, that's one thing. But in the corporate world, you would be targeting companies. So you would advertise on something like LinkedIn as opposed to Instagram, which would then be more specific to those companies. Samina asks, what type of business should be done in Bahrain at the moment? What's the best kind of business? I don't know, selling face masks maybe, or I'm not sure, to be honest. There are many ideas. I've personally got a list of 20 businesses to open. I think if you have an idea, the best thing to do is do some basic market research, ask around, but then go for it and you know, see if it works. Start small, do something very, very quick and see if it has any traction. And you can usually do that before getting the CR, before registering. You can do it within the circle of friends and family, or just give it a small push. And you know, there are tons of ideas. I can't tell you what's good or what's bad, because ultimately what it comes down to is execution. What we're talking about today, getting on the web, you know, making your website look better by having a good domain, that's all execution. Now, I'm not saying your business will fail because you picked the wrong domain, but picking the right domain and having the website and maybe a dozen other things on the checklist are what makes the difference between a successful implementation and let's say one which, you know, doesn't gain traction. Let's take one more question. Do you need a CR for an online business? I mentioned this earlier. No, you don't. Well, you need a CR for businesses in Bahrain, right? But if you already have a CR, if you have a physical shop selling retail, you don't need a different one. If you don't have a CR, there are options. You can get a virtual CR, which is much more flexible. And I think, I'm not sure actually how much it costs, but you don't need to go rent an office and pay that monthly expense. You can get the virtual one. You can start selling online. There are different, you know, I think categories for that VCR, which you can look into. This session is recorded and I will share my details at the end, probably tomorrow in the last slide. I didn't add them in today's slides, but I will share my details and you will have the details of the Startup Workshops team as well. So yeah, on the online CR, just check with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce or do a quick Google search in Bahrain for virtual CR. You should have resources for that. And with that, I'll go back to the presentation. Just a quick quote from Bill Gates, who's getting a bad rep these days. I love Bill Gates, and I think it, you know, this makes sense. What he said is, if your business is not on the internet, then your business will be out of business. And I think this was said, if I'm not wrong, 20 years ago. Bill Gates pushed for the information superhighway, what we call the internet, from the 90s. And a lot of people saw the importance of it. We didn't necessarily see the boom in mobile and in apps. But one thing I think everyone agrees on today is that the internet is here to stay and the internet is the future. Every physical business is now online somehow, be it as simple as email or having more complicated e-commerce channels or dealing with customers on the internet. I think the recent events, the situation we are in today, the fact that we are having this session online and virtually stresses this point even more. So this is maybe a reminder to everyone who hasn't, you know, taken the move yet, everyone who needs a bit more motivation to take more steps to go online or expand online. You know, I'm all for it. It's my field, but even as a business owner, taking the tech out of it, I think the internet is still the future you should focus on as a business. Okay, I think we have another break now. And after this break, we're moving on to our last section. The last section after the break is going to be about social media, how to use it effectively. We're going to talk about social media design and so on. We're going to talk about SEO and marketing, so how to market your website and your social media accounts. And we're going to talk about communication tools like live chats and how to reach your customers, be it WhatsApp or any other means. And hopefully, I think we will finish a bit before 9. We should be good on time. So thank you for staying with us, and see you all in 10 minutes. Okay, we are back. And we're going to move into the last section of today's workshop. Remember, we have tomorrow as well. But in the next section, I'd like to talk a bit about social media. And the title is Embracing Social Media and Building a Strategy. Now, I'd like to stress, we have about maybe 40 minutes left, and there's only so much you can do in 40 minutes. But this topic and most of the topics I'm talking about today and tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, can each have, let's say, a full day on their own. In fact, social media itself can take weeks to sort of perfect. There are online courses, there are even degrees which are specialized in social media. But for the most part, for someone who just wants to know how to use it, I think it's important to grasp the basics if you haven't already. And if you feel this is something you need, if your business can benefit from any of the aspects of using social media, then you need to take it to the next step, which is perhaps talking to a professional or maybe learning a bit more about it yourself and effectively delving deeper into the topics we're going to touch on today. So, how do you use social media effectively? The biggest mistake I notice when I deal with businesses is that they do not have a social media strategy. Now, almost everyone does have social media, right? So many companies have an Instagram and a Twitter account, and they're on LinkedIn. And I'm not talking about small guys only. I'm talking about bigger companies and banks and businesses I'm seeing in Bahrain and in the Middle East that do not follow a social media strategy. And a social media strategy is something you could come up with on your own, but would definitely benefit from working with a professional who knows what they're doing, who has done it in the past, to get it done. I will talk about social media strategy basics in a couple of slides, so we'll jump back to that point. Another point I'd like to stress is to choose appropriate networks. And what I mean by that is not all businesses need to have an Instagram account, and not all businesses need to be on Snapchat, and definitely not all businesses need to be on TikTok. So it really depends on what your business is. All these tools can be very effective, but if you jump in, as I mentioned, without a strategy, without an understanding for what that network is, for the audience of that network, you're at best going to waste your time, but at worst, you might actually negatively affect your brand. I've seen some companies globally try to jump on TikTok with horrendous results because TikTok is the cutting edge of social media. The average age of a TikToker is maybe 10 to 15 years old. It's a whole different mindset, but they are the consumers of the future, right? So everyone wants to get a cut of that. You're talking about the whole generation coming up who are not on Twitter, who are not on Instagram, but are on TikTok. So, I understand why a company might be like, let's do this, let's jump in and let's post and see what we're posting. But without that proper understanding, I've seen disastrous results where the users effectively, you've got these kids end up attacking you, and companies and businesses don't really traditionally respond well to negative comments. So again, another mistake I see locally is not being able to deal with negative comments or jokes, either deleting proper criticism or getting emotional. And I mention this because A lot of startups, you're putting your blood and tears into this, and someone, a kid just comes and writes something negative or derogatory, and you do get emotional and you do feel the need to respond and take it personally. But I think having a proper communication plan in place and rules on what you respond to and how you respond really help and avoid scenarios like that. Third point on the list, if you look at the slides, is choose a unique handle, a username. Ideally, best case scenario, remember that .com you had, you would have the same thing carry over to your Twitter, to your Instagram, to your Facebook short URL. You'd have the same name. But in most cases, that's very difficult to do because, again, all the good names are taken. So unless you have a very specialized name, you're using your own name and it's unique and you can add your business to it, like, I'd say Ehsan Photography. I might get lucky and find that domain and find it on Twitter and Instagram. But if you don't, it's a hard choice. There's no easy way. If you don't get the same name, if you find your name on Twitter, but it's taken on Instagram, and you are going to choose both those networks effectively, then ideally you might need to forget about what you find on Twitter and find a name which is available on both platforms. I'll show you on the next slide just some basics people forget. And again, just mentioning this because from experience today in Bahrain, we even have big companies whose profile pic, the logo you put on your account is low resolution. You click on it and it's either pixelated, or you click on it and it's filling this, it's not following the brand guidelines. And these are basic things. And again, it's one of those things people don't notice. So no one's going to come and rate your profile, but it's one of those subconscious elements. And a lot of what we do online, on social media, on the web, is about that image people don't really think about, but feel. So people will feel if a profile is more professional than another. It will really boost your business when you follow certain steps and keep these guidelines in place and design it properly. Just two more points before I get into the design and details, is to keep the account active. And this is tough. This is something I suffer from sometimes. Keeping the account active and engaging audience and having content. When something like that is relevant to your business, when social media is part of your media communications strategy, you need to keep it active. And there's something we call the 80-20 rule. I'm just looking here because I just remembered it. I didn't put it in the slides. And the 80-20 rule goes against everything you feel as a business owner. As a business owner, you want to push your products. You want to tell people about your business. You want to talk to them about what you're offering, your services, your discounts, and so on. The 80-20 rule says people are not interested in that. So that should only be 20% of your posts, right? 20% of your posts are about your business and your products and the things you really want people to know. 80% should be general posts which are engaging and interesting to everyone who might be following you. So as an example, if you're in the beauty industry, right, and you're selling cosmetics, you shouldn't keep posting your products every single post whenever you have something come up. And you should break it down to 80-20, 80% being industry news, interesting images, interviews with bloggers or people in the fashion industry, even jokes and memes. That's fine. And again, rules are meant to be broken, but keep that in mind before you let's say spam your account with your own products and content just because that's what you want to push. Remember, social media today is a busy place. It's full of posts which pop into people's faces and different algorithms. And again, that requires a session by itself, but just keep the audience engaged by content which is not just products and services. This slide is a brief look at, let's say, 4 different profiles, right? So if you decide, and again, don't open an account which you're not going to use. Don't open a YouTube if you don't have videos. It's okay to reserve the name, keep it there in case you need it in the future, especially if it's a unique name. But if posting videos is not relevant to your business, if it's not something you're going to be doing, let's say on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, then you don't really need that account, and you don't need to post it on your stationery and mention it in your different advertising. But if you do have it, then you need to keep all these different profiles consistent. And you notice they all have profile images, they have headers, they have your content areas, but there are slight differences. Your logo on Instagram and YouTube is in a circle. Your logo on LinkedIn and Facebook is in a square, and it might change in different places depending on whether you're in an app or outside of the app. Going back to the mistake I mentioned earlier, where companies upload a pixelated logo or it's too big, I've seen this happen where the logo is cut off when it's in a circle. Okay, so again, a small thing, but something to think about. When you have multiple profiles like this, you can see the sort of consistency going from one side to another. You're looking at Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, but they all feel homogeneous, right? They feel part of the same brand. I'm mentioning this here because we might be dealing with a lot of startups in today's session, and usually startups haven't reached the point where you have brand guidelines which tell you to do this. Some companies even don't have digital brand guidelines. They just have print brand guidelines. But when you do, it will tell you in which cases, where and how to use your logo, when to cut off the name, when to make it smaller, bigger, what kind of backgrounds and patterns to use, things like that. If you're just starting up, look around, see what bigger companies are doing, try to replicate that sort of look and feel. It might seem like a small thing, but again, it's one of the things which make a bigger impact to audience, as I've seen. So I just wanted to focus on it. Now, the first thing I mentioned on social media is having a social media strategy. And that's the last bit on social media before we move to online marketing. Let me just read out the points. I found this online and I liked it. It talks about some things to put in place. What differentiates you? So, testimonials, your unique story about your business. Who's your customer? You need to know what your demographic is, their location. You need to know the goals. Why are you on social media? And interestingly enough, that's a tough question, because most people are, or most companies, I would say, professional companies, are on social media for the sake of being on social media. So to me, this is the most important thing. What's your goal? Do you want to establish the brand? Do you want to increase visibility to what you are doing? Do you want to use social media to link to something else, to get people to download an app? Do you want to use social media to push a certain topic or to get sales? All these goals are completely different. So you can't say all of the above. It just doesn't work. You need to be specific. You need to know why you're on social media. It all boils down to increasing profit, right? We all, as businesses, we all want to sell, but there are different ways to sell. Depending on what your business is, you need to pick one of these goals. You need to decide on how you will execute, how you will manage the account, who has it. Again, I just love to bring up these examples because these are real world examples I've seen in companies in Bahrain, where the social media manager resigns and no one has the passwords. So the company ends up with an old account, and then they create a new one because there's just no way to recover the old account. The person's gone, they left Bahrain, they forgot the password, And I will talk about password management tomorrow and strategies for keeping passwords with all these different websites and hundreds of passwords we have. But again, you need to think about that. If you're one person, if it's only you creating the startup and you don't have other people on the team, it's much easier, right? It's you're in charge of everything. But then being in charge of everything makes it difficult to break down the different roles you have. When you're responding to comments, you're not always the owner of the business. Your audience have different expectations, and you know, you need to define that. You need to find where they are, what their behavior is, what other accounts they follow. And then the last point here is, when will you communicate? So what's the posting schedule? Are you going to post every day? You can't just leave it random until you have something. You need to have a schedule. You shouldn't post too much. You shouldn't post too little. So again, this is something you can try to come up with on your own. You can go online and search and find examples and think about it. And I think everyone can do a good job of this. Or you can talk to specialized social media consultants, strategists, marketing companies in Bahrain. We've had a few years of experience now in social media since it became more popular in the past few years. So we do have the skills to cover this in-house. So that's it for social media. Again, I didn't go into details, but I hope that gives you an idea on how to think about having a social media strategy. I said everyone should have a website. I think everyone should be on one form of social media at least, regardless of what your business is. You should make that effort to be on one. If you feel none of them are relevant to you, I would say Instagram would be the best and easiest. And it would allow you to post images. Again, I said 80-20, right? So you can post images which are not directly related to things you are doing, just to keep people engaged. You can have a schedule of one post a week if you want, but just have something there in case you need it in the future. Let's move on to online marketing. And online marketing is essentially getting eyes on what you have, getting eyes on your website, getting eyes on your social media accounts, and thus getting eyes on your products and services. Everyone's heard about, I think most people heard about SEO, search engine optimization, which we will talk about in the next slide. I will talk about keywords in that slide as well. And then I'll touch on advertising, essentially paying to have your content, your brand, your image pushed to people. And this is something everyone knows. You open social media or you browse the web and you search and you see ads. So, you know, what better way to get in front of people than to pay for it? And that's, I think, a big part of online marketing. So SEO stands for search engine optimization. And I'm always hesitant to talk about SEO because looking at the market out there, 99% of SEO services are scams. And let me tell you why that happened. Search engine optimization means you're trying to get your website or product to the top of results, right? So if I search for iPhone, I go to Google and I search iPhone, I expect the first result to be Apple. Now, if someone else sells a phone and I search for phone, I'm not sure what that first result is going to be. Is it going to be Apple? Is it going to be Android? So people fight for that top space, right? I'm not talking about advertising. I'm talking about who Google decides deserves to be the best phone on top of those results. And Google doesn't want anyone to know the secrets. There's no way they're going to publish the actual methods they use to get a result on top, okay? So we have businesses in Bahrain who come and say, we're selling product X, we're selling watches, for example, and we want anyone who's searching for watches in Bahrain to get us to be on top. Now, there are things you can do to make that happen, but The only way that will happen is if you have the best watches in Bahrain. I mean, that's what it essentially boils down to. And I tell a lot of companies who come to us for SEO, we do not do SEO because essentially if you do have the best product, this will automatically happen. If people actually care about your product, you will get to the top of the search results. Having that said, it doesn't mean you don't need to do some basics. So if you do go with the website builders, there are some basic SEO concepts which they do for you. You don't need to worry about them. And that's essentially keywords. Keywords is what gets people to come to your websites. The other concepts are backlinks, that's getting people to link to your website. Again, it happens naturally if you're a big company, if you are a global fashion brand, you can imagine everyone's linking to you. But if you're a small startup in Bahrain and no one knows you yet, you don't expect hundreds of sites to link to you unless you are paying people to create fake websites. And those fake websites have links back to you. And that's why I said it, it's sort of scammy, but it exists. People do it for the most part. To conclude on this, let's say for the audience we have today for startups, I don't think it's something you need to worry about so much, except to say, if you're going with a developer, make sure they know what they're doing, make sure they mention it and have it in place. And don't try to fight for rankings until you are much bigger. When you're a big company and you have big competitors in the same market, then you can talk about being the first search result in Google. Until then, you need to depend on advertising. Okay. So when we talk about online advertising, we're essentially talking about Google Ads, the biggest and main player in the market. It used to be called Google AdWords, if any of you have heard about it before. And Google Ads consists of two things: a search network and a display network. The search network is what you see when you search mainly on Google. So when I search for anything on Google today, you've all seen this. You can check on your phone or the computer. You get the ads on top and on the side. These are paid results. People have actually paid to get on top of everything else. It does have the small orange ad tag. I think you can see it in the screenshot here, and you've seen it before online, but it works. Okay, it gets people to actually come and visit the content you wanted them to reach. So, and you have the display network. The display network is if you look at Google, it's YouTube, it's other websites which are linked to the Google network as well. And it's similar to advertising on Twitter, for example, or advertising on Facebook and their branches like Instagram. So you have a choice. When you pick an ad, you can either go for one of these, the search network, where you see all the ads start on the left, and then you might be your relevant results might be lower than that, but what we see here surrounded in the red square is actually just advertising. And then you have the display network, where you have videos, where you watch a YouTube video, but before the YouTube video starts, you have an advert video come on, and then you have your mobile phone, and then as you browse a website, you have an image you need to click and close come up. So when you go and advertise, when you go with Google, you get a choice of any of these networks. And again, I'm not going to go into details today about the, let's say the complicated technicalities behind this, because it is difficult to do on your own. The tools are there, the resources are there, the let's say training and tutorials are also there, but it does take a while to learn all the different terminologies and get into the right and wrong way of doing things. But I wanted to explain the most complicated aspect of it, which is paying per clicks. So in order to maximize their profit, these advertising networks came up with this concept, which is essentially bidding, okay, or bargaining. So they noticed that when people search for phone, everyone wants to be that top result in advertising. Google wants to be on top, Samsung wants to be on top, Apple wants to be on top. So they said, we're going to allow you guys to uh, essentially battle amongst yourself, and whoever pays more will be the top result. So there's no fixed price. When you go and advertise, you can set a price as low as 1 cent, $0.01, or you can pay $1,000 for that same advert. It's your choice. And these guys will tell you it's up to you. We don't know how much you should pay. But if anyone else pays more than you, then they will be on top of you. Their results will be higher and they will win. So they leave it to the market. If you are selling watches in Bahrain and you pay 100 fils to advertise, your ad will appear. But if anyone else comes and they pay 200 fils, they will appear before you and they might even hide your results. When you go online, you'll find that people are advertising everything. There are some words which are not taken, but they're not wanted. So if there's something people are searching for and it sells, you can be sure that someone's competing with you and they're paying for it. So you need to pay more than whatever they are paying. So that's very briefly on advertising, but I think advertising is very important. If you want to reach people today, it's not SEO which will get you there. It is paying for advertising. If you're just starting up, set aside a budget. That budget can be as low as $100. It can be recurring. So you can say, I'm going to pay $100 a month or $100 a week and see the results I get. And the nice thing is you actually get analytics which show you what was effective and what wasn't. You can see the difference between your ads on Twitter, your ads on Instagram. You can see where people are coming from. You can see what they're clicking on. And you can see if that effectively generates into leads or sales or services they are acquiring from you. Okay. Last slide before we close for today. We have a few minutes left, and that's about customer communication tools. Any business needs to communicate with their customers. Businesses nowadays use social media to take queries, but that's not a way of chatting one-on-one. The best method for a website is live chat. So there are many live chat services which allow you to actually interact with customers. You've all gone to a website and you've seen a small chat applet in the corner. That's very easy to implement today, even for free or at minimal costs. And you can actually do it even as a single person using your phone. So you can have your website, which we built earlier, even using the web builders. You can use one of these live chat services, and there are tons of them. If you just Google free live chat service, you will get all the top results. You can integrate it and download their application. And whenever someone visits your website and they message you, you get a pop-up on your mobile phone and you can respond to them then and there and chat with them, right? So that might be someone who's going to buy a product from you. You don't want to lose them. And that's just another way of capturing them. You can, moving on, use voice over IP, okay? I don't know how many of you have heard of this, and I included this today because of the situation we are in and people's inability to go to offices. Now, if you use a mobile phone, you don't have an issue, right? You put your mobile phone, people call you anywhere, and it works. But I do like to stress that for businesses, a fixed line is more professional. Having a 17 or one of the other telecom numbers for a business just makes you, it gives you a higher status and it's worth it. If you're going for a domain, which we mentioned earlier, and you need to pay Batelco the 3 dinars a month to get the domain, you are going to have to get a landline anyway, so why not use it? Now, voice over IP allows you to use that line using your phone. So you don't need to be on your office. People feel like they are calling a company. They're going to call a fixed line, which is on your business card. But what's actually going to ring is an application in your phone. So to the customer, it's seamless. They think they're calling an office somewhere. For you, it's very effective because you can be anywhere. You can have an answering machine on it. And you can have multiple people work on it as well. If you are bigger, if you have a team of people, that call can go to different people, okay? So question is how to do that. A bit more technical that we're getting into today, but remember the term is voice over IP. You can talk to your telecom providers to see if they have it. I know what Tesalcom does. Batelco has started offering VoIP lines, what app to use, how to configure it on phones and so on. That's a bit more technical, and you definitely need someone who's in IT to help with that, okay? I want to talk about Twilio. Twilio is a service which is a bit more advanced, but might be useful to you in the future. And essentially what it does is allows you to connect your services or sites to chat and SMS. So imagine if you're a dentist and you have bookings and someone books either online or just they call you for an appointment, and you enter their appointment details in whatever system you are using, that system will automatically send them an SMS through Twilio, which tells them, reminder, you have an appointment tomorrow. That system can send them a WhatsApp message after they leave saying, thank you for visiting us today. Thank you for buying from us. You know, it's just a way to engage audience and keep them connected. We will talk about automation tomorrow, but I wanted to mention this in case any of you can think of scenarios where you want things to be automated, you want messages to get to customers. It's all about communication. It's all about getting your name in front of the customer whenever they engage with you. So you should definitely do that. Last 2 points I had. Should you use WhatsApp for business communications? I think, again, you need to have a strategy in place. I've seen WhatsApp being used for many businesses, especially as Huda is mentioning in chat nowadays with social distancing. What's happening is that a lot of companies are creating that account and having it, but when it actually comes to using it, you do have scenarios where you message someone and no one responds. You have situations where your message goes unread for hours, or I've seen even days, because some businesses created it and then the person who's supposed to use it didn't come in today, or the phone is with someone else, no one has access to it. So you really need to think about all those questions. And if it's only you running the business, then it's easy, right? You always have it with you. You can install WhatsApp for business alongside your personal account. But if you have multiple people, if you have agents, if you have people working at different times, day shifts, night shifts, you do need to think about these things. And finally, don't forget the social media accounts you mentioned earlier. Never ignore people. Don't create an account which doesn't respond. Have a strategy in place for responding. Have a plan on how to respond, what to say, how to think about how to approach negative feedback. And if need be, you know, you can talk to consultants and professionals on getting these things in place. Okay, so that's all we had for today. If you have any questions, please put them in chat before we close the session for the day. And I'd like to briefly recap on what we covered today. So we went over extending customer reach using the web, using social media. Tomorrow is going to cover technical aspects. We're going to talk about technologies, right? So we're going to talk about technologies like payment technologies or cloud technologies, and just again very briefly touch in a non-technical way on what they mean, so you have a chance to decide whether they are beneficial to your business. At the end of the day, no one else can make this decision for you. It's your business. You know what you're doing. You know what you're selling more than anyone else. So having an understanding about what's out there is essential, so you can know whether you want to use it or not, whether it's going to be useful or not. Let me look at chat here to see if we have any more questions. Question about using voice over IP. Yes, Huda was unable to answer calls and more than 1,000 WhatsApp messages. So yeah, that again goes to show, you know, you need to have a strategy in place. You need to think about it. And maybe we can chat a bit more after that on what we can do in these scenarios. Sarah Jamal asked about their Salon software. The system is based in the US, so that's a cloud system. Tomorrow we are going to talk about software as a service, which are systems you don't buy and install, but keep online. And she asks, is it easy to integrate with Twilio for Bahraini numbers? Twilio is easy to integrate with Bahraini numbers, but when you go for online software, when you rent software from a provider, as opposed to developing it in-house, you are bound by the features they offer. So to answer your question, does the company in the US offer Twilio integration or not? And if they don't, are they willing to do it for you? In most cases, 99% cases, if they don't have it, they are not willing to develop it. So you need to check if they can or if they can't. If you're using your own system in-house, then it's much easier. You bring the same developer who created your CRM system or ERP system, and they can do it for you. Question from Emil. Emil is using auto-responses sometimes when she's having a high number of communications. Yes, that's really good. Just have a target on when to respond. So it's good to tell them, thank you for reaching us. It's good to answer some basic questions in that auto message. Like if most customers are messaging you to ask about your opening hours or your contact details, then it's good to have those in that message, because you might essentially answer their question before they even ask it, right? But don't depend on that message and ignore queries. I've seen that happen where because that auto message is sent, then people don't see that query and leave it for a day or two. Make sure you have a strategy where you actually respond at least on a daily basis, if not more often, day and night. And I think that should get you covered. With that, I'd like to close for the day. I'd like to thank you all. It's been a pleasure. I wish we could have done this at a proper session, which is not virtual, but hopefully we will do that tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow, where we cover the additional topics. And thank you. Have a good night and take care.